نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد بسم الله. Today inshallah we'll start from verse number 114 of Surah Saffat. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. وَلَقَدْ مَنَنَّا عَلَى مُوسَى وَهَارُونَ. And we did certainly confer favor upon Musa and Harun. وَنَجَّيْنَاهُمَا وَقَوْمَهُمَا مِنَ الْكَرْبِ الْعَظِيمِ. And we saved them and their people from the great affliction. Karb al-Azim means al-gharq fil bahr, the drowning in the sea, which was the punishment of Fir'aun, or it could also mean the oppression of Fir'aun that he used to subjugate the people. وَنَصَرْنَاهُمْ فَكَانُوا هُمُ الْغَالِبِينَ. And we supported them, so it was they who overcame. وَآتَيْنَاهُمَ الْكِتَابَ الْمُسْتَبِينَ. And we gave them the explicit scripture. So mustabeen, something that is obvious, clear, explicit. وَهَدَيْنَاهُمَ الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمَ. And we guided them onto the straight path. وَتَرَكْنَا عَلَيْهِمَا فِي الْآخِرِينَ. And we left for them favorable mention among later generations. سَلَامٌ عَلَى مُوسَى وَهَارُونَ. Peace upon Musa and Harun. إِنَّا كَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Indeed, we thus reward the doers of good. إِنَّهُمَا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Indeed, they were of believing servants. So these verses describe the situation of Musa and Harun alayhi salam, and then the next set of verses will continue to talk about other prophets, namely the nation of Ilyas alayhi salam, Lut alayhi salam, and Yunus alayhi salam. But in these particular verses, we know how Musa and Harun alayhi salam were sent to Bani Israel, and then they preached to Fir'aun and his people, and went through many situations, trials and tribulations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given miracles to Musa alayhi salam, but people continued to deny him and regarded him as a magician instead. So in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them victorious over Fir'aun and elevated their status such that even until today, Musa alayhi salam and Harun alayhi salam both are held in deep regard by all followers of Abrahamic faith. وَإِنَّ إِلْيَاسَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. And indeed, Ilyas was among the messengers. So Ilyas alayhi salam is mentioned in the Quran in two surahs. In Surah An'am, verse 85, and then in Surah Saffat. But there aren't any details available in Quran or Hadith about Ilyas alayhi salam. And many books of Tafseer have actually used narrations from Israeliyat to describe the details of Ilyas alayhi salam and his people. So what we learn is Ilyas alayhi salam was sent to Bani Israel after Hizqil alayhi salam and before Yasa alayhi salam, so two other prophets. And when his people did not accept the message of Tawheed, Ilyas alayhi salam then escaped into a cave. He made dua against them for a famine. So for 3 years, it did not rain in that region. And then Ilyas alayhi salam went back to them and challenged the people who worshipped at the time the idol of Baal. And he challenged them by saying, go ahead and offer a sacrifice to your idol and see if that removes the famine. And then he would also do the same for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it was agreed that whoever's sacrifice is accepted, then that person or that group is on truth. And in those times, the way people understood that the sacrifice is accepted is that a heavenly fire would engulf the sacrifice, and that would be an indication that it is accepted. So the idol worshippers did their sacrifice, but it was not accepted. However, when Ilyas alayhi salam sacrificed, then it was accepted, and hence became clear that he was on the truth. There is some discussion among scholars whether Ilyas alayhi salam is the same as Idris alayhi salam, and that he was lifted to the heavens, so he is still alive. But the majority view is that these are two different prophets, and that Ilyas alayhi salam is not alive, similar to Isa alayhi salam, and Allah knows best. إِذْ قَالَ لِقَوْمِهِ أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ, when he said to his people, will you not fear Allah? أَتَدْعُونَ بَعْلًا وَتَذَرُونَ أَحْسَنَ الْخَالِقِينَ, you call upon Baal and leave the best of creators. So again, Baal was the name of a famous idol in those times. Allah Rabbakum wa Rabb Abaikum al-Awwalin, Allah your Lord and the Lord of your first forefathers. فَكَذَّبُوهُ فَإِنَّهُمْ لَمُحْضَرُونَ, and they denied him, so indeed they will be brought for punishment. إِلَّا عِبَادَ اللَّهِ الْمُخْلَصِينَ, except the chosen servants of Allah. وَتَرَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ فِي الْآخِرِينَ, and we left for him favorable mention among later generations. سَلَامٌ عَلَى إِلْيَاسِينَ, peace upon Ilyas. Ilyasin should not be confused as some other names. It is actually another way of saying Ilyas, and this is common in some Arabic dialects where they would add a ya and a noon at the end. So, for example, Tur Sina, which is the Mount of Sinai, is mentioned in the Quran as Tur Sinin in Surah Tin. Similarly, here Ilyasin is actually referring to Ilyas alayhi salam. Inna kadhalika najzi al-muhsinin, indeed we thus reward the doers of good. Innahu min ibadina al-mu'minin, indeed he was of our believing servants. We discussed the story of Musa alayhi salam and Harun alayhi salam, and then we read about the story of Ilyas alayhi salam, and next Quran mentions the story of Lut alayhi salam. وَإِنَّ لُوطًا لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ, and indeed Lut was among the messengers. إِذْ نَجَّيْنَاهُ وَأَهْلَهُ أَجْمَعِينَ, mentioned when we saved him and his family, all of them. إِلَّا عَجُوزًا فِي الْغَابِرِينَ, except his wife was among those who remained with the evildoers. ثُمَّ دَمَّرْنَا الْآخَرِينَ, then we destroyed the others. وَإِنَّكُمْ لَتَمُرُّونَ عَلَيْهِمْ مُصْبِحِينَ, and indeed you pass by them in the morning. وَبِاللَّيْلِ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, and at night then will you not reason. So the story of Lut alayhi salam comes in many places in Quran. Very briefly, his people adopted the practice of sodomy, which resulted in severe punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even the wife of Lut alayhi salam was supporting this practice, so she ended up receiving the punishment as well. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to the people of Makkah. They used to travel through the area for trades where people of Lut alayhi salam was punished, and yet even a frequent visit to this historic site of punishment did not change their erroneous beliefs. And I think we can reflect the same for us when we look at news in particular, and we see all these events, catastrophic events, natural disasters around the world, and we are becoming so insensitive to these events that it doesn't dawn upon us that these are signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This could be trials for people in that area, this could be punishment for people in that area, but really it's a reflection that we need to have when we observe these scenes, that how we should act, how we should change our day-to-day so that we do not find ourselves in those difficult situations, or even when we do, we have a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that He keep us in safety. وَإِنَّ يُونُسَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. And indeed Yunus was among the messengers. إِذْ أَبَقَ إِلَى الْفُلْكِ الْمَشْحُونِ. Mentioned when he ran away to the laden ship. So أَبَقَ means هَرَبَ مِنْ بَلَدِهِ مِنْ غَيْرِ إِذْنِ رَبِّهِ. Left from his city without the permission of his Lord. So abaqa is derived from ibaq, which is when a slave escapes from his master. So we should go into the story of Yunus alayhi salam to understand this context. Yunus alayhi salam is also known as Dhun-Nun, because Nun is fish in Arabic. And Yunus alayhi salam lived in the belly of a fish for some time, hence he was given the title of Dhun-Nun. Yunus alayhi salam was sent as a messenger to the city of Nineveh, which is part of modern-day Iraq. And people used to worship idols at that time, so he called them towards Tawheed. But he got disheartened by the lack of their response. And then he left the city expecting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish them. When he left the city, his people realized that the punishment is coming, the signs began to appear, and they repented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave them and averted the punishment. We learn about that in Surah Yunus, verse 98. فَلَوْلَا كَانَتْ قَرْيَةٌ آمَنَتْ فَنَفَعَهَا إِيمَانُهَا إِلَّا قَوْمَ يُونُسَ لَمَّا آمَنُوا كَشَفْنَا عَنْهُمْ عَذَابَ الْخِزْيِ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَمَتَّعْنَاهُمْ إِلَىٰ حِينٍ. Then has there not been a single city that believed, so its faith benefited, except the people of Yunus? When they believed, we removed from them the punishment of disgrace in the worldly life and gave them enjoyment for a time. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved them from their punishment. But Yunus alayhi salam had already left his nation. So he boarded on a ship along with some other travelers. And when this ship went in the middle of the sea, it got surrounded by a storm. And the captain of that ship then asked people to lighten their luggage, so throw away their luggage in the sea so the boat could be lightened, and maybe this will allow them to go faster. But that was not enough. They agreed to draw the names, and whoever's name comes up in a draw would have to jump the ship. They do it 3 times, and all 3 times the name of Yunus alayhi salam came. So eventually he jumped into the sea, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a whale to swallow him. And that's where he lived for some time. Now there are different views on how many days Yunus alayhi salam lived in the belly of the fish. Some say it was 3 days, or 7, or 20, or even up to 40 days. In any case, when Yunus alayhi salam realized his mistake, he began to make tasbih while he was in the belly of the fish. La ilaha illa anta subhanak inni kuntu minaz zalimin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then forgave Yunus alayhi salam and ordered the fish to throw him near a remote island where he was given shade under the vine of gourd, which is a form of squash, as it comes in the upcoming verses. فَسَاهَمَ فَكَانَ مِنَ الْمُدْحَضِينَ. And he drew lots and was among the losers. So فَسَاهَمَ means they voted or held a draw to pick name of a person who should be then thrown in the sea. And at this point, a question may come to mind: is it okay to participate in a draw? As we see that Yunus alayhi salam agreed to the draw. So there are many forms of a draw, and you need to look at the particular conditions under which that draw is being held to determine whether it's permissible or not. As an example, if a company wants to give a limited number of gifts to its employees and simply puts their name in a draw, then such draw will be fine. Similarly, if you purchase something at a store and they put you in a raffle for your purchase without any additional cost, then winning a gift from this draw would also be okay. But if you had to buy a ticket to enter such a draw, that's when it becomes similar to gambling and will not be permissible. Today, when we look in our society at various schemes and lottery programs, they are being presented to people as merely fun activities. And you would see commercials referring to slot machines and lottery tickets as simply playing a game of chance. What is quite unfortunate actually is even Muslims have started to take this matter very lightly. And you now see people in our communities buying lottery tickets as well. And not only that, you would even see people going to places like Vegas, where they visit casinos and play card games, board games, poker, roulette, bingo, you name it. All these so-called games are included in gambling and are strictly prohibited. As we learn in Surah Ma'idah, verse 90, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إنما الخمر والميسر والأنصاب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوه لعلكم تفلحون. O you who have believed, indeed intoxicants, gambling, sacrificing on stone altars to other than Allah, and divining arrows are but abominations from the work of shaitan, so avoid it that you may be successful. So clearly there is prohibition of gambling. And a layman might think, what is the harm in spending a little with a chance to win? Even if I don't win, wouldn't this lottery benefit someone else in need? We get a response in Surah Baqarah, verse 219. يسألونك عن الخمر والميسر قل فيهما إثم كبير ومنافع للناس وإثمهما أكبر من نفعهما. They ask you about wine and gambling. Say, in them is great sin, and yet some benefit for people, but their sin is greater than their benefit. So indeed, there is some benefit in such activities, but their sin and evil supersedes their benefit. And if you look up online the terms of gambling addiction and social issues related with gambling, you will see how the entire society gets negatively impacted by gambling. So we make dua, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us and our generations from all sorts of gambling and forbidden acts. Ameen. Continue on to the next verse. فَالْتَقَمَهُ الْحُوتُ وَهُوَ مُلِيمٌ. Then the fish swallowed him when he was blameworthy. So فَالْتَقَمَهُ means ابْتَلَعَهُ, swallowed. And mulim means آتٍ بِمَا يُلَامُ عَلَيْهِ, came with something that was blameworthy. فَلَوْلَا أَنَّهُ كَانَ مِنَ الْمُسَبِّحِينَ. And had he not been of those who exalt Allah, لَلَبِثَ فِي بَطْنِهِ إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. He would have remained inside its belly until the day they are resurrected. Musabbihin means al-abidin al-dhakirin, those who are engaged in worship, in dhikr, doing tasbih. And this tasbih is La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minaz zalimin. And we should understand the power of this tasbih. It is very effective in situations of distress. So whenever you find yourself in a situation where you feel like now there is no escape, similar to Yunus alayhi salam, he got stuck in the belly of a fish. How can you ever get out of that situation? You should start making tasbih. La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minaz zalimin. And inshallah, you will see the effect of it. We also learn in a narration narrated by Sa'ad radhiyallahu anhu in Tirmidhi, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, دعوة ذي النون إذ دعا وهو في بطن الحوت لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين فإنه لم يدع بها رجل مسلم في شيء قط إلا استجاب الله له. Allahu Akbar. The supplication of the Nun, meaning Yunus alayhi salam, when he supplicated while in the belly of the whale was, there is none worthy of worship except you, glory to you, indeed I have been of the transgressors. So indeed, no Muslim man supplicates with it for anything ever, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to him. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam reassured how anyone asking, a Muslim person asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with this tasbih, he will be responded to by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you analyze this tasbih closely, you find that it has three parts. The first one being La ilaha illa ant, which is to declare the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Subhanak, to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and acknowledge that He is without any imperfection. And then finally, Inni kuntum minaz zalimin, accept your deficiency and acknowledge that you have indeed committed a wrong, and now you need the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to get out of this situation. When the verse mentions if he had not made the tasbih, he would have remained inside the belly, someone might think, well, would he remain alive in that belly until the day of judgment? That's not what is meant here. What's meant here is he would perish in the belly, and the belly would become grave for Yunus alayhi salam until the day of judgment. فَنَبَذْنَاهُ بِالْعَرَاءِ وَهُوَ سَقِيمٌ, but we threw him onto the open shore while he was ill. فَنَبَذْنَاهُ means فَطَرَحْنَاهُ مِنْ بَطْنِ الْحُوتِ, threw him out of the belly of the fish. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala threw Yunus alayhi salam out of the belly of the fish. بِالْعَرَاءِ, so what is ara? بِالْأَرْضِ الْخَالِيَةِ مِنَ الشَّجْرِ وَالْبِنَاءِ, the land which is devoid of trees and buildings. So it was an island that had no trees or buildings. And then saqim means alilun aw da'iful badni, sick person or a physically weak person. Meaning Yunus alayhi salam became weak and sick as he lived in the confines of the belly of the fish, similar to how you would see a newly hatched chick, as an example, without any hair on its body. That's a reference that Mufassirun has made as a visual of the condition of Yunus alayhi salam. وَأَنبَتْنَا عَلَيْهِ شَجَرَةً مِّن يَقْطِينٍ, and we caused to grow over him a gourd vine. So yaqtin, name of a fruit, gourd or squash, that's a plant, a vine that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grew for Yunus alayhi salam. وَأَرْسَلْنَاهُ إِلَى مِئَةِ أَلْفٍ أَوْ يَزِيدُونَ, and we sent him to his people of 100,000 or more. فَآمِنُوا فَمَتَّعْنَاهُمْ إِلَى حِينٍ, and they believed, so we gave them enjoyment of life for a time. There's some discussion here on was Yunus alayhi salam sent to these 100,000 people after he came out of the belly of the fish, or this is the city of Nineveh where he was sent to begin with. Ibn Kathir kind of combines the two ideas and says it's not impossible that he was sent to Nineveh, which had 100,000 or more people, and then after he went through his experience in the belly of the fish, came out, that he ended up going back to the same city where people accepted him again as a prophet. And Allah knows best. Let's review verses 114 to 148. So we learn about the stories of Musa alayhi salam, Harun alayhi salam, Ilyas alayhi salam, Lut alayhi salam, and Yunus alayhi salam in these verses, and how in the end they were all victorious because they were on Tawheed, they were on the path of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then in reference to Yunus alayhi salam, we learn how there are some forms of draws that are permissible, but purchasing tickets for raffle and lottery, as an example, are prohibited. And then there are many virtues of this tasbih, La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minaz zalimin, which was the dua of Yunus alayhi salam, and it is supported also by the narration of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, how anyone who makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with this tasbih, he will for sure be responded to by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll stop here inshallah. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم.